This morning, we hear a parable that tells about the lives and deaths of two characters, a rich man and a poor man. We hear how they each experience both suffering and abundance. Let us rise in the ways we are able for this reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things, but now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then I beg you, Father, to send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." And he said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." These are holy words for all God's people. Thanks be to God.
Be seated. I'm not sure if you heard in the news this past week that there was quite a bit of chatter that the rapture was coming. Did any of you hear this? Yeah, okay. So Tuesday was supposed to be the day. It was the most recent prediction of the end time, the time when Jesus Christ would return and true believers, it is said, would be swept up and into heaven. And so there was this warning. It kind of spread on social media through TikTok and got picked up, and there were these warnings about how to be ready, convert now, have your affairs in order. I found out after the fact that there were even articles about keep your passwords out and your devices unlocked so that people would be able to access them to finalize your affairs, which I'll have to say, I found that instruction to be both very thoughtful and a very low opinion of the people that you live with or love. That certainly you will be raptured, true believer, into heaven, but woe upon those who are left to pick up the pieces. Either way, I guess the instruction, the invitation was to be ready because Jesus is a-comin'. And as far as anyone can tell, Wednesday came, Tuesday came and went, Wednesday arose. Thank you. I was like, that's not the right word there. Here came Wednesday, the rapture came, it went. And as far as we can tell, there was no rapture end time, no one swept up into heaven. And so, my dear friends, we will have to settle for this parable of Lazarus and the rich man For at least in this parable, when Lazarus dies, he is swept up by the angels to be held in the embrace of Abraham. It is as close, it seems, as we are getting to the rapture this week. But I don't know if it's because of all this news about the rapture and the end times and the call to get ready and what will it be like. But I almost fell into a trap this week where I was almost enraptured in the details of this parable. The details about after, what happens after the two men die. I found myself really caught up in the depiction of Hades and the torment and the eternal thirst. And what would it have been like with Abraham, there, Lazarus and Abraham? And for a while, I started letting my mind just go with the human curiosity of what happens after death. And you know, the thing about that temptation is that it is tempting to get so caught up in those curiosities that I nearly missed the whole point of the parable in the first place. You see, this is a parable just like any apocalyptic warning, like any end-time prediction. The whole point is the urgency of now. It is less about what happens after the prediction and more about how that matters right now. How are you getting ready? How are we living at this point? And so the story, it is a story about Lazarus and a rich man, but it is really a story and a message for the characters who don't even appear in the story. It is a story for the benefit of the 5 brothers who are left behind that the rich man is so worried about. This is a story for the benefit of the Pharisees who Jesus is talking to when he tells this story. And when Luke mentions Pharisees in the gospel, they are always one-dimensional characters. We should keep this in mind. They are caricatures, and they fill in for anyone who is associated with self-serving wealth. This is how Luke presents the Pharisees, not as full people. And so this is a story for the Pharisees. It's a story for the wealthy man's 5 brothers. It is a story, I would say, for all of us who still hear it today as followers of Christ. What happens after they die, the men die in the story, the importance is the urgency for the now, for those who are, quote, left behind, still living. So let's remember their story for a minute as we begin. There was a rich man, so extravagantly wealthy. We see just sort of a snapshot of what happens before. The rich man, so extravagantly wealthy, self-servingly wealthy, wastefully wealthy. And there at his gate, right on his doorstep, is Lazarus, hungry and starving, covered in sores and wounds, with only the dogs who come by to tend to him. That's all we get. And then the story says both men die. And the angels sweep Lazarus away into the embrace of Father Abraham. The title will be an important one, of Father Abraham. And if we remember Abraham as the ancestor who received the promises from God, so to be held in the embrace of Father Abraham is to speak of peace and comfort and something of the promises of God. It is a good place to be. Meanwhile, the rich man, when he dies, he is said to live in eternal torment, thirsty and unable to quench his thirst. And so he calls to Abraham, Father Abraham, tell Lazarus to dip his hands into the water, flowing water, so that the water might drip off them and soothe me. It's an interesting thing that suddenly the rich man, who must have known Lazarus all along, but did nothing while they lived, he recognizes him after death. But Abraham is not going to send Lazarus to tend to the poor man. Instead, he replies, see, you have had your comfort in life while Lazarus was empty, and now he has his comfort. Besides, there's a great chasm, a great big gap, a divide between us that no one can cross. When I shared the story, and I said it a little differently with our youngest disciples in our first service, I said, that's not fair. There's a part in here that challenges us And as I said to our youngest disciples this morning, I believe that this is one story in many. I believe in God's grace to go into the gaps. But this story is about the urgency of what is done is done. And so what is done is that the wealthy man never tended to Lazarus at his doorstep, and so now Lazarus will not be doing any errands for him. Undeterred, the rich man tried again. He called out, demanding, hopeful, certain that this time he would get a response. Then send Lazarus to my brothers. I have 5 of them. I don't want them to end up suffering like me. If they see Lazarus, they will believe. Abraham kind of questions this, is a little skeptical that his brothers will be so easily persuaded. But he says, your brothers have Moses. They have the prophets. They have the instruction. They have the teaching. What more do they need? They have what they need. If they're not persuaded by that, then what will persuade them? Abraham is not sending Lazarus on the rich man's errands for him. Heavy in this whole dialogue is the implication that had the rich man listened to Moses and the prophets and the instruction and fulfilled the teaching of the law while he lived, to love his neighbor, to care for those nearby him, then perhaps they'd be having a very different encounter, a very different exchange. Had the rich man learned how to serve God above mammon, this would be different. This is a series of stories where Jesus is teaching about how to serve God above wealth. No need for the desperate warning or the pleas. You had what you needed. What's done is done. This is what helps to underline the urgency of the parable. For those who still live, what's done is done. As pastor and poet Steve Garnis Holmes wrote this week, the gate that was between them, the gate between the rich man and Lazarus, has become a great chasm, impassable. What's done is done. And this just heightens the urgency for those who are left behind. For the brothers, will they too come to understand? Will they see that for all of us we live and we die, and none knows the hour nor the day? Will they come to understand that there is only this time, right now, to fulfill the law that has been given? That there is only now to love our neighbor. There is only now to care for the widowed and the orphaned. There is only now to look beyond the gate and see who is lying on the doorstep. There is only now to act and share and give. You see, this week on Wednesday, after all of the predictions about Tuesday and the rapture had come and gone, there were a few jokes that went around. I saw a few of them about the rapture being a little late for its own deadline. Maybe another date instead. But you see, dear disciples, here's the truth of it. The truth is that every day is the day to be ready, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to tend to the poor, to show compassion, to visit the sick, the detained, the imprisoned. Every day is the day to see those who lie at the gates overlooked and dehumanized, those who are waiting for a crumb to fall from the table. Every day is the day for us to share, fling open the gates, and serve from our tables. I told you that the title Father Abraham would be a part of this parable, and it is. Whenever the rich man calls to Abraham, he calls him Father Abraham, and Abraham, for his part, calls him child, son. But all the while when he is doing this, he is holding in his arms Lazarus, another child. The implication being, how often had the rich man been unable to see the shared humanity, the brotherhood, the kinship between himself and Lazarus? Abraham, father of them both. And yet, the rich man never learned how to see Lazarus and the humanity and the kinship that they share. Even after death, he was still trying to just send Lazarus on his errands for him, self-serving errands for him. The man never learned what it is to serve God and serve neighbor. He only learned how to serve self and wealth. And so the question that this parable puts is for those 5 brothers who are left behind, will they learn to see the kinship in their community? Will they learn to see shared brotherhood and humanity in those who are lying at their gate, at the doorstep? And as New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine puts it very succinctly, will we? Will we ever learn in the same way? That's what needles us about this passage. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to needle us a little more before we move into where there is goodness. There is goodness. I cannot help but notice as I was reading the passage that I could hear parallels even in our most well-meaning way of talking about caring for folks who are vulnerable. I have heard some parallels to the way that the rich man thinks of Lazarus, even in well-meaning speech. I think particularly about the media and the way we talk about protecting immigrants and migrants in our community. Much like the rich man, we live in a world that is individualized, and we have a tendency to wait till something impacts us before we are compelled to do something. And I think this is clearest. It's not the only place, but it is clear in the language. Have you ever noticed that the narrative around protecting migrants and immigrants in our community picks up pace and support when someone frames it as, but who will pick our food? But who will clean our facilities? Who will do the jobs we ourselves don't want to do? As if it is not enough for us to say the treatment of immigrant and migrants in our communities that has been dehumanized, that are being detained in unjust and inhumane ways, is not reason enough to say something, to do something. It is the framework until it impacts something that is inconvenient, that we are called to do more. And I'm grateful we eventually get to doing more, but I think what this parable challenges is before it is too late, before it impacts you personally, what does it mean to love our neighbor? To see in our neighbor kinship and shared humanity and brotherhood or sisterhood before there is something about that person that conveniences or impacts us. Why not, as many scholars, as many activists, as many people of faith say, why isn't it just protect the immigrants and the migrants, period? Because it is the command of God, because injustice is wrong, because to serve and love our neighbor is to serve and love God, because they are us. Insert any number of vulnerable people in our community. To protect the immigrant and the migrant and the stranger in our community is the word and the will of God. To protect our trans neighbors is to serve God. To provide for the poor is to serve God. To feed the hungry is to serve God. To stand in solidarity with any and all who are overlooked, cast off, kept behind the gate, stepped over on our doorsteps, is to serve God. To see one another who are dehumanized and unseen as kin in the kingdom of God is to serve God, is to love God. A friend of mine that we have done some work in the past as we met through a cohort that was doing anti-racism work in our own selves. And my friend reminded me of something. Many folks remind me of this, but she most recently did, that there is privilege in being able to not look beyond the gate. There's privilege in being able to overlook Lazarus. There's privilege in being able to turn aside from all that is uncomfortable and difficult on days when we have just had too much. Not everyone can turn aside. There is privilege, and it is a self-serving privilege. And in this story, I think that the rich man never learned how to set aside the self-serving privilege to love his neighbor, even when it didn't serve him the way our world defines it anyways. And he is worried. He is worried that his brothers left behind will not learn. And New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine asks, will we? This is the question that needles us in the parable this morning. And parables are meant to needle at us. It's okay for hard things to needle at our spirits. I think that's how we grow, honestly. But I also said that there is good news in this. There is tremendous challenge. There's also always tremendous good news. And this is where I think I find the good news. Abraham, when he is talking to the rich man and he says, I'm not going to send Lazarus for you, he is clear. The brothers who are left behind already have everything they need. They have the teachings of the prophets. They have the teachings of Moses. They know the instruction. There's nothing more that they need. They do not lack anything to be able to fulfill the commandment. And do you know why I think this is really, really good news? Is because I think the same is true for us. There is nothing that is lacking for us to be able to fulfill the commandment. As people of Christ, by the grace of Jesus Christ and the teaching of the law and the prophets, we have what we need. Which means we don't have to wait to get it all figured out before we can start. We don't have to wait to figure out some of us want to dismantle all the gates, right? There are sometimes we're like, we just want the gates not to exist. We don't have to figure out how to dismantle every gate to start flinging it open, to start seeing behind it, to start knowing our neighbors as kin. Woe if we are waiting for some other warning or for something more dire. Woe if we are waiting for something more dire. Lord, have mercy upon us. Woe if we are waiting for a safer time, a more convenient time, an easier time. Woe if we are waiting for some other end time prediction date to decide now is the time. Because, dear disciples, now is the time. This is the only time that we have. This is the time for us to learn kinship and humanity and belovedness like we have forgotten or have not known before. Now is the time to serve neighbors, to give generously, to feed those who are hungry, visit those who are detained, work for justice in whatever possible way we can, for all who are hungry and overlooked. We don't have to wait to have it all figured out to start. That's really good news. If anyone feels like they need to have it figured out to start, it's good news to know you don't. You don't have to wait to have more to be able to give generously out of what you already have. There's nothing that is going to magically show up tomorrow that is going to radically change what we should be doing today if what we are called to do today is love. I shared a series of woes. Let me share a series of blessings. I said, woe if we are waiting, but blessed are you who give now out of whatever it is that you have to give. Blessed are you who recognize belovedness and belonging in those beyond the gate and within it. For you who will not give in to the lies of dehumanization that are everywhere in our world right now. Blessed are you who put off self-serving privileges in order to serve God and love our neighbor instead of serving self and mammon. It might not have been Tuesday, but I think it is today. Today is the day to step into the gaps between us with love and compassion, with generosity. Now is the time for compassion in action before the gaps become chasms too wide to cross. Amen.